We're spending this year talking about the Brahmaviharas, or what is often called the four divine abodes in Buddhism. They're called abodes, vihara, because the intention is that they become the mind's constant dwelling places where we feel at home. They should not merely remain places of rare and short visits. In other words, our minds should become thoroughly saturated by them. They should become our inseparable companions, and we should be mindful of them in all our common activities. So, compassion is the second Brahmavihara. The Pali word is karuna. Now, many of my teachers have said, and this has been true for me, meditation practice has increased my ability to be compassionate for myself and for others slowly over time. This has been one of the biggest treasures of my practice, this gradual awakening of compassion. It's actually been so gradual that I did not recognize that it was happening. I was changing, but it took me a long time to notice this. When my mindfulness is strong, this quality is very satisfying to feel. Compassion has a feeling of settledness, sweetness, and rightness. I wonder if any of you have noticed this shift since doing the daily sit. Do you notice being kinder to yourself and others? Has compassion for yourselves or others become a companion that visits more often? Like all of these heart qualities, compassion is ever changing. I want to share a small example of the subtlety of compassion and how it has shown up for me in an everyday life interaction. A couple of weeks ago, I was trying to hire someone to help me with a specific project. He came and did half of the job, but it was clear by his response time and his communication that it may be frustrating to work with him to finish. I also know this man is very much in demand. His skills are unique, and he appeared overwhelmed when he did the job. I called him about when he may be able to finish the project. He was caring for his twin 3-year-olds. I could hear them in the background, and he seemed stressed during our conversation. I reminded him of our agreement and asked when he might finish. He then angrily told me about how busy he was and about all the work he had to do, and then he hung up on me. So at this point, I knew he probably wouldn't finish the job for me, and I would have to figure something else out. Although it was frustrating, I knew this was not personal. So I called him back and apologized for catching him at a tough moment, and said that I understood he likely couldn't do the job, but to contact me if anything changed. His tone changed to relief, and the phone call ended amicably. Before my mindfulness practice, I knew compassion would not be what showed up for me in this kind of circumstance. I value reliability and people keeping their word, and that would have been my focus. And who knows, maybe if I was caught in a stressful place in my life during this phone call and not open to others in this moment, I would have felt differently. Very likely. But I was grateful for feeling compassion for him in this moment, grateful that this was available to me. Karuna is the ability to turn towards suffering with metta or care, and when possible, to help suffering to release. Compassion helps us to turn toward what's difficult without flinching or getting lost in overwhelm. Each of the Brahma Viharas has a near enemy and a far enemy. The far enemy is the direct opposite of the quality we're trying to develop. If you find yourself seething with the opposite quality you're trying to cultivate, that's okay. That is why we call this a practice. Working mindfully with this reaction is what helps. It was known that this would happen in the Buddhist times, having the opposite feelings to the four heart qualities, according to the Buddhist teachings. The far enemy of compassion, which definitely feels unpleasant to us, is cruelty. And the near enemy is something that seems like it is in the terrain of the Brahma Vihara, but it is just off in some way. And because it is somewhat closer to the Brahma Vihara or heart quality that we're aiming for, it can be a bit harder to recognize. With compassion, the near enemy is pity. So going back to the conversation I had earlier with the man I hired, when I was calling him to help me, if I was not aware of my practice, I could have been hostile and reactive to him, hanging up the phone on me. That hostility or cruelty would have been the opposite of compassion. Likewise, I could have responded with words of pity, or more likely, I could have pitied him by my internal attitude. Both the far enemy of cruelty and the near enemy of pity are tied to the ego and to selfing. Even if our reactions are not directed to another person, we feel that reverberation internally. We feel the opposite of that at-home feeling inside. And our compassion has been slowly cultivated by our mindfulness. It's not personal. It just arises as the natural condition of cultivating mindful awareness. Dharma teacher Gil Fronsdale says, compassion functions to not carry the suffering of others. When we have karuna, we are not burdened or distressed by the suffering of others. These are the key qualities of compassion, to not be distressed by suffering and to be interested in alleviating suffering. We see the helplessness of those overwhelmed by suffering and of ourselves when we're suffering. True compassion joins us with another. Pity subtly separates us. Deep connection with ourselves and one another can help us in almost any circumstance. So again, when I ended this phone call I have been referring to, I genuinely wished this man well. I felt compassion for his stress and pain, and I knew it was not personal. For me, that is this practice at work. Compassion is important for how we live, for what motivates us, and for how we orient ourselves in the world. Compassion touches the heart in a deep way. It succeeds when our hearts are moved in such a way that we're not burdened or distressed, and when there's a strong motivation to help and support people to suffer less. This is the magic or the specialness of it. Some people feel that there has to be a sense of the weight of the world being on their shoulders. But to have compassion is sweet. According to Buddhist teachings, compassion is one of the great sources of being happy in the world. As the Dalai Lama says, if you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. So I would like to end with a poem by Irene Sipos, and it's called Tired. Sitting across the aisle on the B train, I look at the row of weary faces, various shapes, sizes, colors, ages, a horizontal explication of what it means to have woken many mornings, to brave routine, to leave concerns at home along with scattered laundry and unwashed dishes, to head for same at work. I picture each of you one at a time. I try to observe without you knowing, and suddenly I see round, soft faces, no creases in foreheads, no wrinkles like parentheses around eyes, no downturned mouths, no slumped shoulders. I see the plump babies you once were. And with that, a rush of hoping that you were affectionately held on generous laps, that you were sung tender songs, that you were offered a bowl of blueberries as initiation to the messy pleasures of this world. I hope that occasionally you reached back, even if only briefly, to recall your beginning self as a visitor new to the planet, unencumbered and dear. So thank you for your kind attention.